Within the oppressive machinery of apartheid South Africa, a unique conflict played out, one intertwined with faith, conscience, and the stark realities of racial segregation. White male Jehovah's Witnesses, caught between their deeply held pacifist beliefs and the mandatory conscription enforced by the infamous Defence Act, faced a harrowing choice: comply and violate their core tenets, or resist and endure the brutal consequences. The Defence Act of 1974, a cornerstone of apartheid's militaristic apparatus, mandated compulsory military service for all white South African men between 17 to 21. This presented an insurmountable hurdle for Jehovah's Witnesses, whose religious doctrine strictly prohibits any form of violence or participation in armed conflict. Their commitment to pacifism, rooted in biblical interpretations, placed them directly at odds with the state's demands. Many young men who refused the call-up to do military service were imprisoned, some up to 4 years. The Act in Section 67, however, did recognize the possibility of bona fide conscientious objectors. These individuals, including the Jehovah's Witnesses, the Seventh-day Adventists, Society of Friends, etc., theoretically could opt for alternative service options like working in hospitals or on government development projects. Many, however, were made to serve within the military in non-combatant roles, such as in the laundry section, the kitchen, and food services. In reality, the path to recognition as a conscientious objector was arduous and fraught with pitfalls. Applicants faced rigorous psychological tests and intrusive interviews designed to discredit their sincerity, often employing blatant prejudice against nonconformist religious groups, like the Jehovah's Witnesses. Very often, after serving time in detention, many were called up for a second time, and so the cycle would continue. The Act in Section 67, however, did recognize the possibility of bona fide conscientious objectors. These individuals, including the Jehovah's Witnesses, the Seventh-day Adventists, Society of Friends, etc., theoretically could opt for alternative service options like working in hospitals or on government development projects. Many, however, were made to serve within the military in non-combatant roles, such as in the laundry section, the kitchen, and food services. In reality, the path to recognition as a conscientious objector was arduous and fraught with pitfalls. Applicants faced rigorous psychological tests and intrusive interviews designed to discredit their sincerity, often employing blatant prejudice against nonconformist religious groups like the Jehovah's Witnesses. Very often, after serving time in detention, many were called up for a second time, and the cycle would continue. Many of these young witness men, while sentenced to detention, refused to wear military-issued clothes. Their civilian clothes were removed, and they were not issued alternatives. A research paper relates the experience of one Jehovah's Witness who served 3 terms in detention and spent the winter months in nothing but his underwear. They were repeatedly put into solitary confinement as punishment. For those deemed impostors by the state, the consequences were severe. Refusal to comply with conscription orders resulted in immediate arrest and imprisonment. Harsh sentences ranging from several months to years awaited these young men, condemning them to the brutal realities of South African military prisons. Within these confines, they endured physical and psychological hardship, ostracization by fellow inmates and guards, and the constant threat of further intimidation and abuse. The impact of their resistance extended far beyond individual suffering. Families bore the emotional and financial burden of imprisonment, communities grappled with the loss of valuable members, and the wider public was forced to confront the dissonance between the government's claims of religious freedom and the blatant persecution of peaceful minorities. Despite the immense personal cost, the defiance of white Jehovah's Witnesses during apartheid held crucial significance. It served as a testament to the importance of upholding one's conscience, even in the face of overwhelming state power. Their sacrifices shone a spotlight on the inherent injustice of apartheid's militaristic apparatus and its disregard for fundamental human rights. While the plight of white Jehovah's Witnesses imprisoned during apartheid South Africa undeniably stands as a testament to faith and conscience, a critical and often overlooked aspect adds further complexity to the narrative. The alleged inaction of the Watchtower Society, the faith's governing body, in supporting those imprisoned for their conscientious objection. There is an article on jw.org that is incredibly disingenuous. I'll read an extract from the article. It says, Christendom and Neutrality. How did the churches of Christendom respond to the issue of compulsory military service? The South African Council of Churches, the SCC, passed a resolution on conscientious objection in July 1974. Rather than sticking to the religious issue, however, the statement had distinct political overtones. It supported conscientious objection on the grounds that the military was defending an unjust and discriminatory society and was thus waging an unjust war. The Afrikaans churches, as well as other church groups, were not in favor of the SACC resolution. The Dutch Reformed Church supported the government in its military pursuits. It rejected the SACC resolution as a violation of Romans chapter 13. Another group that opposed the SACC stand was that of the religious chaplains serving in the South African Defence Force, which included clergymen from churches that were SACC members. In a joint statement, the chaplains of the English language churches condemned the resolution and declared, "We urge every member of our churches and especially the young men to make their personal contribution in the defense of the country." Furthermore, the individual member churches of the SACC did not take a clear position on neutrality. The book, War and Conscience in South Africa, admits most failed to clarify their positions to their membership, let alone challenge their members to be conscientious objectors. The book shows that the government's strong reaction to the SACC resolution, backed by strict legislation, made the churches hesitant to stress their convictions. Attempts to commit the church to a constructive program of action met with failure. In contrast, this book acknowledges by far the majority of conscientious objectors who were imprisoned were Jehovah's Witnesses. It adds, Jehovah's Witnesses focused on the rights of individuals to oppose all wars on grounds of conscience. The witnesses' stand was strictly religious, while they concede that the existing authorities stand placed in their relative positions by God. The witnesses remain politically neutral. Their primary allegiance goes to Jehovah, who reveals in his word, the Bible, that his true worshippers will have no share in carnal warfare. Now this was from the 2007 yearbook of Jehovah's Witnesses. While the organization officially endorsed individual refusals of military service, reports suggest a stark disconnect between pronouncements and practical support. Many former witnesses and family members accuse the Watchtower of failing to provide legal assistance, offer emotional or financial support to imprisoned men, or even advocate for their release. This alleged passivity, they argue, stands in stark contrast to the organization's usual zealous dedication to its members' well-being. Several narratives painting a troubling picture exist. Number one, lack of legal aid. Families recall being left to navigate the labyrinth legal systems without guidance or financial assistance from the Watchtower. Some even claim the organization discouraged seeking legal counsel, potentially fearing it could undermine their stance on non-participation. I remember talking to a former white male Jehovah's Witness who was imprisoned at the time. His family approached the local elders in their congregation to be present at the court hearing, and they emphatically refused. Number two, limited emotional and practical support. While individual congregations might offer some support, accusations claim it was often minimal and inconsistent. Imprisoned men felt abandoned by their spiritual leaders, left to deal with the harsh realities of incarceration without crucial guidance or solace. Then number three, the absence of public advocacy. Despite their high-profile nature of this injustice, the Watchtower reportedly remained hesitant to publicly condemn the apartheid government's treatment of conscientious objectors. This perceived silence fueled accusations of prioritizing organizational reputation over the well-being of imprisoned members. The reason behind this alleged inaction remained murky. Some speculate the Watchtower feared jeopardizing its own precarious legal standing under apartheid. Others suggest they prioritized maintaining internal unity and feared that actively challenging the government could lead to wider persecution of the faith. Whatever the motives, the consequences were undeniably grave. Many imprisoned men felt betrayed and abandoned by the very community they had dedicated their lives to. The emotional and psychological toll of isolation and perceived neglect compounded the physical hardships of incarceration, leaving lasting scars on both individuals and families. While the apartheid regime crumbled, the scars of that era continued to resonate for many white Jehovah's Witnesses. The trauma of imprisonment, the lasting effects of social stigma, and the unresolved grief of fractured families remained burdens carried by many. Additionally, the issue of compulsory military service, though no longer directly faced by white South Africans, continues to spark debate within the Jehovah's Witness community globally, highlighting the ongoing tensions between individual conscience and state demands. However, the discussion would be incomplete without acknowledging the broader context of racial disparity during apartheid. While white Jehovah's Witnesses undeniably faced persecution for their beliefs, it is crucial to recognize that black South Africans, particularly black Jehovah's Witnesses who also objected to serving in a system designed to uphold racial segregation, suffered immensely under apartheid. Their experiences were significantly different, marked by additional layers of racial discrimination and oppression. Therefore, any comprehensive understanding of conscientious objection during this period must consider the distinct challenges faced by different racial groups and avoid perpetuating narratives that center the experiences of white South Africans while neglecting the profound struggles of black communities.